done the meeting spot. I'd like to welcome everyone here and those watching on Facebook Live to the National Council of Jewish Women Chicago North Shore's tribute to the notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I am Debbie Wiedinghoff, and I'm the president of the Chicago North Shore section. Today there are 25 NCJW sections across the country, including in Washington, D.C., California, Minnesota, Texas, Florida, and New York, participating in ceremonies like this one. We gather not only to honor the legacy of Justice Ginsburg, but to symbolically mark the end of the formal mourning period and returning to the world. For many of us, this is our first in-person gathering since mid-March, when we all retreated to the safety of our homes to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 virus. I thank those of you here joining us, and I also thank those watching from home for making the decision to do what is best for your health and safety. Facebook Live attendees, please let us know you're watching by sharing a memory of Justice Ginsburg, on how she inspired you, or how she inspired you in the comment section. For those gathered here, please remember that we are observing all the recommended COVID-19 precautions, so please wear your masks and observe the 6-foot rule of social distancing. There's also hand sanitizer available. So let the sticks come. I'd like to recognize members of our section's board of directors who are here today. I see Robbie Schreiber, our secretary. Raise your hand if you are a board member, because I can't recognize anyone with a mask on. I am sorry. Looks like just Robbie today. Thank you, Robbie. I would also like to thank our executive director, Melissa Prober, for making this event happen on such short notice. And for her technical skills in broadcasting this on Facebook. Today you will hear from Jill Lexier, our State Policy Advocacy Chair. She will remind us of the impact Justice Ginsburg has had on all of our lives and how you can help keep her legacy alive. We are also honored to have Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, NCJW Scholar in Residence, here to share with us her reflections of Justice Ginsburg and lead us in the mourner's cottage. We appreciate her joining us today. However, before I turn it over to Jill, I'd like to take a moment to tell you about our section's current work. As part of NCJW's national campaign to promote the vote, protect the vote, we have convened a coalition of more than 20 diverse organizations to help Illinoisans navigate voting during COVID-19. This nonpartisan coalition is called Promote the Vote Illinois and is committed to making voting easier and more accessible for all voters. In addition to this, our section has launched a racial justice campaign entitled Anti-Racism is a Verb. This campaign will strengthen our relationship with Black community partners, lift up Black voices in our community, support Black businesses and artists, and advocate for policy change. As many of you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and is when our annual Luggage for Freedom project donates suitcases full of necessities to women and children in local shelters. You can participate in this community service program by assembling dignity bags of personal hygiene items. For what to include in your dignity bags and drop-off locations, you can visit our website page called NCJW Gives Back. Finally, we have joined the NCJW national movement, Ruth's Revolution. Through Courts Matter Illinois, we continue to educate our members and the community on why federal courts matter and the importance of a fair and independent judiciary. In fact, there is a timely webinar coming up on Tuesday, October 13th, on how courts matter to reproductive rights. To learn more about all these initiatives and to register for upcoming events, please visit the website ncjwcns.org. If you are here today or watching on Facebook, we know you care about these issues. So please join us in our campaigns to make positive change happen in the coming year. Now, I'd like to introduce Jill Lexier, the Illinois Chair of the State Policy Advocacy Committee.
There is a time for mourning, and then there's a time for movement. And today we're marking that transition. And even though it's the end of the formal Shiva period, I know some of us will be continuing to mourn Ruth Bader Ginsburg for quite a while. As those of you who know me know, I lost both my parents this year, my mom just a couple months ago. I'm still mourning them. Losing Ruth Bader Ginsburg feels like losing a parent. We loved her. We knew her. She did so much for us. She made our world a better place. Because of her well-deserved celebrity status, the movie, the documentary, the great exhibit down the street at the Illinois Holocaust Museum, we do know quite a bit about her. We know how her early struggles with discrimination informed her life as a person, as a judge, and then later on, eventually, as a Supreme Court Justice. And we know her as a historic champion of equality who fought to protect the basic freedoms for every single person. So here are just a few examples. Ginsburg passionately fought for the rights of the LGBTQ community. Justice Ginsburg joined Justice Kennedy's majority decisions in many landmark cases in LGBTQ civil rights history, including securing the legality of same-sex marriage in 2015. In her private life, Justice Ginsburg performed many same-sex marriage ceremonies. I'm watching the speech. The first Supreme Justice to do so. She fought for the rights of undocumented people. In 2018, she was part of the majority decision that protected undocumented people from expulsion. She fought for the rights of disabled people, including those with mental and developmental disabilities. And she fought to expand and protect voting rights. She's probably best known, though, She's probably best known, though, for advancing women's rights after her own experiences of fighting for respect and status as a young woman lawyer. As NCJW, we know her as a Jewish woman, a devoted wife, a caring mother, and a tireless champion of gender equality. Not only is she a feminist icon or a role model for us, she actually changed the social landscape of this country. She helped usher in an era of greater equality, which touches our lives in ways we might not even realize, but for which we should always be grateful. So here are 7 things, one for each day of the week, one for each day of a traditional Shiva period, that we can be thankful for RBG. Okay, who here has a bank account or a credit card in their own name? Everybody! Before Ginsburg, believe it or not, women couldn't sign a mortgage or a bank account without a male co-signer. Ginsburg paved the way for the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which passed in 1974 and allowed women to apply for credit cards and mortgages without a male co-signer. Thank RBG! Yay! Who here worked outside the home ever in their great, sizable number? Ginsburg helped people make strides towards equal pay. In 2007, Ginsburg famously dissented from the Supreme Court's decision on pay discrimination case, Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. Her dissent was compelling because 2 years later, Congress passed legislation called the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, which made it easier for women to file a discrimination suit. Thank RBG! Who here attended a state-funded school? Okay, a few. Before Ginsburg, state-funded schools did not have to admit women. In 1996, United States versus Virginia case, Ginsburg wrote the majority opinion that it is unconstitutional for schools funded by taxpayer dollars to bar women. Thank RBG! Who here worked while they were pregnant? Seems a no-brainer, but it was pretty standard only 40, 50 years ago for women to be fired from their jobs when they were pregnant. In 1972, Ginsburg argued that excluding a pregnant woman from the Air Force, like in the case of Struck versus Secretary of Defense, is sex discrimination. Thank RBG! Thank you! Who here served on a jury? I actually have never served on a jury. Okay, cool. Ginsburg argued that women should serve on juries. During the 1979 case of Duren versus Missouri, jury duty was optional for women in several states because it was viewed to be a burden for women whose roles was seen as the center of home and family life. In a 2009 interview, Ginsburg upheld this notion, saying, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made." Thank RBG. Who got to marry the person they love? Not it's so enthusiastic. As mentioned already, RBG was a key vote in granting same-sex marriage. In the 2015 case, Obergefell versus Hodges, allowed lesbian women, queer women, and the rest of the LGBTQ community the right to marry the people they love in all 50 states. Further, she expanded the concept of gender discrimination to considerations of gender identity and sexual orientation. Thank RBG! Number 7. Who has had an abortion, knows someone who's had an abortion, or believes in a woman's right to choose?
Yes.
Justice Ginsburg's presence on the court preserved a woman's right to choose. She has been characterized as an indispensable brick in the legal wall that has protected Roe v. Wade since the 1970s, and not just on the Supreme Court. However, now that she's gone, this is in jeopardy. Her replacement could further empower state legislatures to pass new laws, or to reintroduce those laws already struck down by the Supreme Court. Now, many of the other advancements that we have celebrated seem pretty entrenched in our society, but not this one. This one is at risk. The absolute best way to thank her, to not only honor her legacy, but to protect her legacy for all that she has done for us, is to keep fighting. To keep fighting for justice and equality for all. Now, in your program, I hope all of you got it, there are some ways, some ideas for how to do that. And if you're on Facebook Live, I understand the information is uploaded to the event discussion and will be sent to you afterwards. So once we stop mourning and once we start moving, what can we do? As Debbie already mentioned, first, but the information's right there, first, we can join Ruth's Revolution, which is NCJW's initiative to continue Justice Ginsburg's legacy by advocating for a fair, independent, and qualified judiciary. And on that website, please sign the petition to ensure her seat is filled only after every vote is counted. And call our senators and ask them to oppose the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to a lifetime seat on the Supreme Court. Now, even if we know that is their position, please contact them anyways, because they really need to feel our support. And when you contact Senator Durbin, ask him to use his tenure, to use his leadership on the Judiciary Committee to speak out about what's at stake given this nominee. And it's not only reproductive health, at risk, but our general health care as well. And let's take advantage of other opportunities for learning and action, including the one that Debbie already mentioned is in your program, an upcoming webinar on October 13th on court's matter to reproductive rights. And last, and the most important, is to vote and to encourage everyone you know to vote. Early voting has started in many, many counties already. And finally, I want to leave you with one other thing to thank RBG for that I do hope is firmly entrenched in our society. You know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg made it cool to be a confident, hardworking female leader. And speaking of, I believe she left a lasting legacy on NCJW and all of us here today by being an example of a powerful woman in her writing, in her speaking, in her work, in her life. And speaking of powerful leaders, we have one with us today. I have the pleasure of introducing Rabbi Danya Rutenberg. We are so honored and fortunate to have her with us. So Rabbi Rutenberg is the scholar in residence for National NCJW. She's been at this job for 1 month, she told me. She is the author of 7 books, including Nurture the Wow, Finding Spirituality in the Frustration, Boredom, Tears, Poop, Desperation, Wonder, and Radical Amazement of Parenting, and a memoir of her own spiritual awakening entitled Surprised by God, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Religion. She writes frequently for the Washington Post and other outlets. We're so lucky she lives right close by in Evanston, so she could join us. A rabbi, an author, an editor, a thought leader, a super cool person that you should be following on Twitter if you haven't already. Rabbi Danya. Hi, everybody. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's very exciting to get to meet all of you in person for the first time, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a long and unfolding relationship, as I am literally, a couple miles away. Today's a big day, huh? Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice you shall pursue. This verse from the Torah, from Deuteronomy, was up in Justice Ginsburg's office while she worked at the Supreme Court many, many years. This was the core of her Jewish connection, of her, I think, judicial philosophy, and at the core of so much of what she stood for and believed in. Now, this verse, justice, justice you shall pursue, gets thrown around a lot in Jewish social justice circles. Right? It's almost cliche, maybe it is cliche, I don't know, but it's Torah, it can't be cliche. I don't know. But what's important to know is in what context it lives. The verses just before this one are about creating and maintaining a fair and independent judiciary. It says you shall appoint justices and magistrates and they shall judge you. They should show no partiality. They should take no bribes because bribes will blind the eyes and keep people from doing their work. Right? When you have special interests, when you are beholden to forces other than your commitment to adjudicating the law, you cannot adjudicate the law. This was at the core of Justice Ginsburg's work. And it's important to know that in the larger context of the Torah, this was not, it was neutral, but it wasn't part, if that makes any sense. Right? What are the other things that the Torah tells us to do? To make sure that we are setting up systems of economic justice, right? To make sure that we are not only caring for those who are economically at risk today, but setting up systems to make sure that they do not get ultimately profoundly disenfranchised, right? The Torah teaches us to care for the stranger,
right? 36 times in the Torah, again and again and again, you shall care for the stranger because you are strangers in Egypt, right? This is our primary commandment, is to remember that those who are most vulnerable are obligated to be objects of care and concern, right? And that we need to center them in our work. The Torah again and again and again reminds us to protect the widow and the orphan and the stranger, right? We hear that refrain again and again, and that's functionally biblical intersectionality, if you will, right? We need to be concerned about people who are in poverty or at risk of being in poverty, and those whose identities make them particularly vulnerable to specific kinds of oppression or hardship need special attention for our care and concern. Right? This is the law that needs to be judged impartially. Right? The law is not, the Torah isn't saying, yeah, whatever you think. The justice and care and setting up systems for the most vulnerable, that's the work. And Justice Ginsburg understood this. She had, as everybody knows, she was famous for her jabot, right, her collars. And she had a special one that had the letters Sadi, Daled, Kuf embroidered on the 3 points. Sadi, right? Justice. She had a collar that literally helped her to put on justice, to wear the Torah's mandate on her body. It could not be any more physical or embodied. And she wore it to hear the opening arguments about a year ago on the question of whether or not LGBTQ people are covered under sex discrimination laws, which I think also exemplifies who she was and how she understood this work. So much of her life's work was about creating access points, particularly around gender discrimination. Right? In particularly places where she herself had suffered discrimination, she was able to make profound changes, as we just heard from Jill. And the whole idea is that equal protection under the law means equal protection for everybody. Whether or not it's impacting me personally, we need to make sure that everyone is taken care of. That's our job. And that was her work. And she showed it in her work around LGBTQ plus issues, around voter enfranchisement, around reproductive justice, around a myriad of issues. She understood that judging fairly means equal protection under the law, means making sure that everyone is enfranchised, right? That those 3 things are one and the same. And how we can honor her legacy is by keeping our eye on that ball, right? That all of these things are the same. They are all intertwined, right? The work of making sure that our judiciary is full of judges who are going to judge impartially and who are not beholden to outside interests is at one with the work of making sure that everyone has access to all of the health care that they need, including reproductive health care, right? And is at one with the work of making sure that our voting rights are enfranchised, is at one with the work of making sure that our systems of economic justice are set up to take care of everybody, is at one with our work of taking care of immigrants and fighting for immigration policy that's good for everybody. It's all connected. And our work and our legacy is, our work is to care for her legacy and to carry that work forward as we move forward from now. So today is the last day of Justice Bader Ginsburg's shiva. Traditionally, shiva lasts 7 days, but since tonight starts the holiday of Sukkot, shiva is ended early. This is one of those things we had, like, tests on in rabbinical school, shiva math. But so there's a tradition in some communities, and I went looking. There is evidently no written source for this, but it's a strong tradition that when mourners get up from shiva on the last day, they take a walk around the block to symbolize their return to the world. Right? They've been in this enclosed space, being able to have some space to take care of themselves and their heart and their grief, let the community take care of them, and then it's time to say, okay, now I'm coming back and I'm back in it. And so in a couple of minutes, we will go have a walk around the block, around the courthouse block, around the forest preserve block, as a way of symbolically saying, okay, this is painful, this loss is real, it's profound. We lost a giant, and we have work to do in the world. And this is that ritual marking the transition from one space to another. Right now, I'd like to invite us to say the Kaddish together for Justice Ginsburg. It is in your packets, in the middle. Either, if you know it, wonderful. If you would like the transliteration, it's right here. So, for everyone for whom this feels appropriate, please say with me. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabah. V'yalma divrach pirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon u'vyomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, bagala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabban levorach v'am amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'al v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitoleh v'yitalal shmid v'yidashar b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Tamiram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlam haraba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Now I'm going to invite Debbie back to read one more poem, and then we will walk.
I'd like to thank Rabbi and Jill for doing such a wonderful job. Thank you so much. We're going to end with a poem by Maya Angelou. When Great Trees Fall. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines Noah's unkind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls dependent upon their nurture. Now shrunk, wizened, our minds formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die after a period, peace blooms, slow and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. So that concludes our ceremony, but we are going to walk to the courthouse. Walk at your own pace, walk as far as you like and are comfortable. If you are not comfortable going all the way to the courthouse, you can do a symbolic walk right here in the forest preserve. We need to remember to social distance while walking, And also to follow the traffic signal. We can't go around the courthouse because it's blocked off. So we're going to go to the courthouse and reverse and come back. Melissa and I did a trial run. It's about 15 minutes for the round trip. So that concludes this portion. Give us a minute to get organized so one of us can lead the walk. And I hope you'll all join us. And thank you all so very much for coming. I really do appreciate it.